The bombing campaign in Gaza is continuing. Israeli troops are bombarding the territory. They claim to be going after Hamas and terrorist targets, and we'll come back to that in a second as to how true that claim is. But first, let's look at a picture here of people in the Israeli city of Sderot watching the bombings like it's a movie. So this was released on Twitter, and they were cheering when the bomb struck. So naturally, this led to a massive Twitter firestorm and backlash. And as you're about to see, in my opinion, I think it's totally merited. And even if you think that the bombs are killing nothing but bad people, nothing but terrorists, let's go a step further. Are you a good person to cheer that either way? Or are you also possibly quite barbaric in your own right? So let that question swirl around your head a little bit as we continue here. So let me give you some numbers on the situation, and you can see the extent of the damage. Over 800 homes in total have been destroyed in Gaza. 17,000 Palestinians have fled the Gaza Strip for UN territory. Over 1,000 people in total are injured from the bombings. And then when we get to the death toll, you see that it is unfortunately quite high. About 175 people are dead, and as we speak now, that number very well may be ticking up. This is as of a few hours ago. So let's take a look at the other side of the coin here and see how many Israeli injuries have occurred. There have been 6. And how many Israeli casualties have happened so far? A grand total of 0. It's gotten to the point where this isn't a war. This is a bloodbath. Now, if you're thinking, well, maybe the Palestinians who were killed had it coming, maybe they're all Hamas, or maybe they're all terrorists, quote, as of July 13th, the UN reported that 77% of the people dead in Gaza are civilians. Civilians. Now, let's pause here for a second. Imagine that was reversed. Imagine there were 175 Israeli casualties, 0 Palestinian casualties, and 77% of the Israeli killed were civilians, including many women and children. How would Israel react, and how would the United States react? Would we not, number one, call for an immediate ceasefire? Number two, say that everybody in the Palestinian territories guaranteed are terrorists? And number three, embark on such an over-the-top campaign that you would level whatever's left of Gaza. Now, let's unfortunately go a little deeper into this rabbit hole here. I'm going to warn you in advance. This is an extremely graphic video. If you have a weak stomach, if you have even a moderately weak stomach, if there's any question in your mind as to whether or not you can take gruesome images, do not watch the following. I'm showing this because I think it's necessary to show it. This is one of the attacks that happened in the Palestinian territories. This is from a hospital. You see a child who's been killed and a father reacting. That's incredibly hard to watch. I don't know how correct this is, but some websites are saying that what the father was screaming there is, I brought you a toy. I brought you a toy. Seemingly in disbelief that his child has been taken from him and is dead. It was a gruesome injury, as you can see there. And I think the main point of the conversation here is if Israel's goal is to prevent terrorism, as they claim, and to stop Hamas and stop violence, well, maybe they should stop participating in it themselves. Do you think that when you have 77% of the casualties being civilians, that you're stopping Hamas? Do you think that's stopping fundamentalism and extremism and people who want revenge? No. It is emboldening Hamas. It is making them stronger. It is radicalizing the people in the region more. You have to understand, man, the same theme that's at work when the United States does drone attacks in Pakistan, Yemen, and Somalia, and we end up 98% of the time killing people who aren't top Al-Qaeda operatives, right? We blew up a grandma. We blew up a wedding, a bunch of cars in a row that were for a wedding. When you do something like that, you make people who are otherwise moderate go, fuck this. I'm going to grab an AK-47 and join a group that's going to kill these motherfuckers who are killing us. And they view it as purely defense. And even if some of the people, which, okay, 77% were civilians, but the rest of them you could say, well, they were Hamas or they were terrorists. But for every one of them you kill, you created 100 more. And now this video goes around the internet, and so many people see it, and then guess where all of the sympathies lie? When you have one side that has modern weapons and F-16s, okay, and Iron Dome, which stops 90% of the rockets that come into the Israeli territories, people are not going to look at, oh, it's a fair fight. Oh, they're just defending themselves. Really? Are they? Let me ask you a question. Why is it that on the Israeli side, they have to keep track of the fighting by saying Hamas launched X amount of rockets? That's strange, right? Because that's not how we count it on the other side. We don't say Israel dropped, 427 bombs and shot X amount of missiles. No, we don't do that. Now, why don't we do that? Because on one side, there's fucking casualties. On the other side, there's not. Now, look, I'm not excusing the rockets that are shot by Hamas. Not only is it violent, it's also fucking stupid. You're not going to get anything accomplished. You're giving people cover to then continue to say, oh, well, we're just defending ourselves and we're just going to keep attacking and we're just going to keep killing people. You're giving them cover to do that. And, Hamas was flying this primitive drone that looks like fucking Amazon made it, and the Israelis shot it out of the sky in 0.3 seconds. But then guess what happens? The media harps away on the fact that Hamas had a drone, and then they act like, well, what do you want us to do? We're going to have to keep attacking. We just saw a fucking drone. They're getting more and more advanced. What are we going to do? Meanwhile, again, Iron Dome, which is in part funded by the U.S. taxpayers, it knocks 90% of the primitive rockets out of the sky, which is why there are 0 casualties on the Israeli side, right? But then they look at that and they use it to justify, well, now we're going to have to keep bombing, we're going to have to keep killing, and they disregard the fact Netanyahu, totally unapologetic, was on TV over the weekend saying, well, yes, we have to defend ourselves, and Hamas is using human shields and this and that. Look, you're making the problem worse. You're making the problem worse. If you kill 77% civilians, if there's video of women and children being killed, you have to look in the mirror. You have to realize that you think you're fighting for what's just and what's right, but in the final tally, if the Palestinians ended up killing Israeli civilians, we wouldn't say, oh, well, maybe there were reasons and they missed their target and this and that. We would across the board say, well, they're terrorists. That's just a fact. They're terrorists, right? But when it's state-sponsored and when it's the extremely far right-wing Israeli government and Netanyahu is leading the charge, that's not terrorism? That's not terrorism. Try explaining to the father or the kid who had their head fucking blown off, oh, no, it's okay because they didn't mean it. Oh, they didn't mean it. Well, I guess it's okay then. But we can do something humane. We can do something just. We can do something right. We can have peace. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. but it's definitely going to be much better than it is right now if you stop the occupation and you go back to the 1947 borders. Sometimes good fences make for good neighbors, man. Go to the 1947 borders, build giant fucking walls, and have UN peacekeepers right smack dab in the middle of the Palestinians and the Israelis. And I guarantee you violence will be much, much less than it is right now. And look, the conclusion is inevitable at this point. Yes, Hamas is stupid for continuing to shoot those primitive rockets into the Israeli territory, which are totally ineffective anyway. But what Netanyahu is doing, it's coming pretty damn close to terrorism.